Hello, I'm here today with Neil Shah, Director of Research here at Edison. Neil co-authored the white paper, The Future of Equity Research, which was published in January 2014. Welcome, Neil.
Thank you.
Could you just outline what the white paper says?
The white paper charts the changes we've seen in the equity research ecosystem as a result of regulatory changes. The key catalyst that we're focusing on right now is a series of changes that the UK regulators proposed, and it sets out what we think are 6 short-term and 6 long-term changes.
Could you just explain briefly what those 6 short-term changes are?
In the short term, we expect to see a continuation of the separation of payments for execution services and research services. We expect that asset managers are going to continue looking for alternatives to sell-side research. Ultimately, we think that we're going to move to a priced versus an unpriced research environment. Currently, investment banks don't put a specific price on research. The regulator is asking asset managers to establish a price for that research. I think it's going to lead to downward pressure on commissions being paid to sell-side banks. And ultimately, I think that's going to lead to consolidation. And finally, I think that's going to force through some changes in terms of the content and the type of research being produced out of the sell side.
And long-term?
Long-term, some of those short-term trends will continue to develop. But the big changes I see are that, firstly, I think there's going to be innovation in the research environment. What do I mean by that? Well, the PDF, which all the content is locked up, is going to disappear. I think we're going to move to research which is produced in HTML5. It's searchable. It uses current web technology. It's going to embed audio. It's going to embed videos. It's going to bring the product to life. Secondly, I think asset managers are going to work harder to find alternative sources of what I call non-distributed alpha. So currently investment banks distribute their research to every asset manager. So that information is available to all asset managers. Actually, what asset managers are looking for is an edge. So they're going to find proprietary sources and build a network. I think asset managers are going to start to force through perhaps a change in the type of content that they're getting from investment banks. So research analysts are valuable. I think they help create the kind of intellectual inputs that asset managers want. They give feedback in terms of market sentiment. Ultimately, they provide great corporate access. Banks need good analysts to price liquidity. But you don't need 15 analysts. You need 1 or 2, bright people to do that per sector. I think that with the diminishing sell-side research, we are going to see fewer and fewer analysts. There's a couple of responses we see in the long term to accommodate that. Firstly, more and more exchanges are trying to get involved in the provision of research. So they're setting up schemes facilitating the provision of research. And then finally, businesses like ours are flourishing as a result of it. So we have a very different business model. It's akin to the rating model, where companies, issuers pay us to produce research. And we've been growing steadily for the last 10 years, and we continue to see great prospects for our business.
And how important is regulation and regulatory change for the shape and growth of the equity research industry?
I think the white paper sets out why regulation matters enormously to the equity research ecosystem. Why do the buy side need the sell side? Well, in 1934, the SEC set out in their rules that asset managers would not be breaching their fiduciary duty by paying for, out of customer commissions, external research inputs. That really is what gave birth to the sell-side research industry. Big Bang allowed those banks to develop waterfront coverage models where they would try and cross-sell all their services using research as an entry point. Elliott Spitzer and his changes meant that model suddenly started retrenching because you can no longer fund research out of corporate finance. Best execution has meant that research commission payments have started to decline, and we've seen a retrenchment. I mean, there has been a significant decline in the provision of research over the last decade. We estimate something like 50% lower coverage over the last decade as a result of these changes. And the next set of changes the FCA is proposing, I think, is going to be one of the most significant catalysts this industry has seen for over 100 years.
Why exactly? Why are the FCA proposals so significant to the industry?
The FCA is forcing asset managers to think what they're paying for in terms of research input. So it's being much more prescriptive about what asset managers can use customer or dealing commissions and what they can use those dealing commissions to pay for. So they can no longer pay for corporate access under the proposals. They can no longer pay for market data. But they can pay for research, providing it meets certain criteria. Ultimately, I think it's also stopping tidal research payments. It's setting a budget for what an asset manager is going to be able to pay for research. That, to me, is saying that we're moving into a priced environment going forward. When you move from an unpriced to a priced environment, it can be horribly commoditizing for the average. It can be very good for those providers are good, but I think there's going to be a lot of people who are suddenly going to find that actually there's very few people willing to pay for their services.
And do you think this is a predominantly UK issue, or is it likely to spread globally?
I think this is going to be a global phenomenon. Two parts to it. One, asset managers are continuing to consolidate. The large are getting larger. The top 50 asset managers control a significant proportion of the world's assets under management. They don't want to have disparate systems around the globe. So I think there'll be some harmonisation. We've also seen evidence of it in previous regulations. So when best execution was brought into the UK, it then became a US phenomenon and then became an EU phenomenon. The current proposals set out by the UK regulator are trying to make sure that asset managers are spending their customers' money in the right way. I think other regulators are likely to follow suit. And the UK is going to establish this position as its basis for negotiating the next MiFID round, effectively, and that will become European legislation, in 2016.
Neil, thank you very much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
If you'd like any more information, please do visit the Edison website.